What's up, Whiskey Throttle Media? This is Arden Ballard, your host of Crash Cart, and I'm here with a guest that might look familiar to you. David, how are you, sir?
Very good, very good. Just in the Blue Crew studios here, and stoked to be talking to you, man. We've talked about doing this podcast for a while about these topics, and it's something that's I've been wanting to just talk about for a long time. So I'm excited we're doing it.
I've been itching to talk about this as well because I think we're seeing almost like a revolution in the sport of motocross, and the season is not getting any shorter, but the athletes are getting more fit, and they seem to be lasting a little longer. So I wanted to get your take on that from your experience, and then what I see as a medical professional.
Yeah, I love it. Let's dive into it, man. It's there's a lot to unpack, and we've kind of broken it into 3 different podcasts, but it's all sort of intertwined. And I think whether you race professionally, you're a weekend warrior guy that just, loves to ride, or you don't even ride anymore. You just like watching the sport. This touches everybody. And I think everyone can get something out of it.
So let's jump into the concept of periodization. And some people might not understand what that really means, but if you can put your high school football hat on for some of you folks watching, periodization is the idea where you segment your training schedule into certain types of workloads, right? And so you have typically 4 sets of periodization. You have a preseason, you have an in-season, you have a postseason, and then an off-season. And all these have different training methods and goals. And Ping, did you ever subscribe to a periodization method in your line of when you were racing, or was that a complete concept that was foreign to you?
Yeah, you got to remember, I'm real old, buddy. So this was, back in the 90s, everything was so rudimentary in terms of training. It was like, just go ride your bike till you almost pass out. I mean, that was kind of the mentality. Like, the more you did, the harder you went, the tougher you were, right? We know that's not accurate at all. That's not the right way to do it. As far as periodization goes, I mean, we just basically started prepping for Supercross as quickly as you could after getting a small break after the summer, knowing that you were trying to kind of peak. For us on the West Coast, if you're doing West Coast Supercross, it was like end of January, you wanted to be really hitting your stride. And so, and then it would change, right? But then it would go east for several months. We'd get outdoor testing done. And so we sort of had an ebb and a flow, because motocross and supercross are so different. The way you train for them, the systems that, need to function, it's totally different. And it's fast twitch and not so fast, and more sprint stuff and more endurance stuff. So that would have been like I said, very rudimentary. It's completely different now on a professional sports level or even collegiate level. The problem with motocross that we have is, and periodization, and you can talk to it from a professional standpoint, but it's very, very proven, right? To not, you can't maintain this super elite level of performance for 365 days a year.
Right.
Your body just can't take it. So you build and you build and you build, and you have a time where you peak, where you're like, okay, in this window, you're going to be just performing optimally from a physical, mental, just general well-being standpoint. And then it's going to taper off. It has to. And then you can kind of build these peaks throughout the season. So the problem with motocross is there is no breaks. We get these little weekend breaks tossed in here and there. The end of the season comes. A few people do say, okay, I'm taking a good 2 to 3, 4 weeks off maybe, and then they're back into it. But a lot of guys got to go to Motocross of Nations. Then it's like, hey, Paris Supercross is paying me $80,000 to come race. Like, oh, how do you turn down $80,000? So they go to that, and then Ozex wants to have me over. Like, it ends up, these guys have a week or 2 off maybe, and they're back on it. Like, you can't grind 50 weeks a year. So the schedule doesn't allow periodization. It doesn't allow rest, recovery, and there's no solution to this, because you're never going to get a race promoter to go, you know what, we have too many. I should give up a race. We should knock a couple supercrosses down, maybe take another national or 2 away. They'll never do it. And so, you're just grinding these guys, and we've already seen it with like RV and Dungy. Some of these guys retiring in their 20s, who I would say probably don't like Dungy. He didn't really want to retire, but man, the grind just gets to be so gnarly when you don't have any breaks. If they could give these guys little breaks, I think we're talking about extending their careers, and that's good for everybody. So that's my little rant about where we're at with the sport. But I mean, I'd love to hear you talk more about periodization.
Well, you hit the nail on the head, and they're certainly not going to take away races, right? I mean, I think they were really cute by saying when SMX came to, they're like, oh yeah, we're going to take one national away, but then they added 3 races at the end of the year. So I think it was a net positive 1 race at the end of the day. Sure, they get more money, but if you
and I do, just to I'm not bashing the SMX. I actually really like the playoffs.
Same.
I think it added something, and I like it. I'm all for it. But man, I think the Nationals need to go to 10. I need Supercrosses need to come down 1 or 2 in order to compensate for that, and give these guys just a month. Give them 1 month off. Like, if you look at football, any other sport, any other athlete, they get way more time off than that.
Right.
Look at the GP guys. They're off for, months and months.
That was going to be my point. The MXGP takes several weeks off between races.
Yeah. And at the end of the season, those guys, they go dark. They don't even look at a bike for months. And it allows them, when they come back, to just get super focused and be all in and get healthy. If they have a surgery they need to get, if they have just an injury they've got to heal, they have plenty of time to do it. Our guys, it's like, got to get back on the track, man. Figure it out.
And several guys have been on record saying that they look forward to, certainly injuries suck, and nobody ever wants to go through an injury, but a lot of guys in retrospect are saying, man, that was the only time I had 2 months off in 10 years.
Yeah, it's a fact.
I think there are a couple of guys currently in the sport that have kind of cracked the code, and I don't know this to be true or not. I'm not training athletes. I'm not in these guys' circle, let's say. But you look at Chase Sexton, you look at Jet and Hunter Lawrence, and sure, they're young, but they have positioned themselves for a very long career if they want it. Sure, they got to stay healthy, but then I think their training schedule, they're kind of doing these micro-periodizations where, sure, they might not want to peak until around 3 or 4 Supercross, right? And that might give them 6 weeks off after Motocross to Nations, where they're not hitting it so heavy, and they're lax, or maybe a lot of times use that time to get married or go on a big vacation or something. So in their mind, they're like, all right, maybe I'll have 2 peaks during Moto. I'll have one around round 6, round 7, and then they'll kind of coast a little bit. And then they want to ramp up again, for that round 15, 16 time frame, because Outdoor Nationals is coming, starting to get hotter. Demand is going to be higher. And then usually these guys get a couple of weeks break during Moto. It's usually right after Red Bud, they get a week off. And
yeah, Memorial Day. There's I think 3 weeks where they get a weekend off.
Right. I mean, God forbid they have 2 weeks in a row off, but nevertheless, they get it like a 10-day break where they can kind of like maybe coast on their training in between during the week. If I were training these guys, that's kind of how I would do it. I'm instead of taking a year's worth of periodization, I would say, let's break it up into like 3 or 4 little micro sessions. And I think that's going to keep the guys healthier, and I think it's going to keep them happier. And you're not going to see an RV situation where they're so burnt out by 27 years old that they just have to go dark on the sport.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And there's, unfortunately, we have this culture of, like I said, if a little bit's good, then more is better.
Right.
And so whether it's miles on the road bike, or it's laps at the track, or it's blah, 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 we all have a tendency to get sucked into, I'll just do another moto. I'm going to grind out another 10, because I know my competitor only rode 50 miles today. I'll ride 60.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all in an effort to try to like get that little bit of a mental edge, which it's important. I get it. But these guys have got to like figure out that quality is better than quantity. And there's a time and place for quantity, right? Pre-season, that's when you're building that foundation, that base. Now you hear all these guys talk about boot camps. That's what it is. It is a lot of volume, but it's not maintainable. That isn't something you can sustain throughout the season. So, you build that base, and then you know, I got to believe these guys have figured out. And Johnny O'Mara would be the first one to tell you that he overdid it when he was racing.
Right.
So what a great resource, you know, to be with the Lawrences and going, hey, look, don't do too much because this is what happens. I did it myself. You know, let's keep it really what we go do, really sharp, really concise, and focus on showing up to the races rested and ready.
I think you're right. And there's a time and a place to build, and then there's a time and a place to maintain. And, you know, unfortunately for these guys, once they hit the pro ranks, their time to build is almost done. I hope these pro guys aren't naive enough to think that, oh man, I'm going to put on, 10 pounds of muscle in those 4 weeks, in between October and December. And, oh, I'm going to get super fit and I'm going to be able to, it doesn't work, man. Like if you want to put on that kind of weight, or because my mentality personally, I should back up and say, I think you're going to see more guys that are jacked racing moto. I think you're going to see guys with really strong numbers in the gym and less, really long miles on a road bike. I think, in the next 10 or 15 years, you're going to see, and you're already seeing it. Like, Deegan and Chase, for example, like those guys are stacked. I mean, they have lower bodies that would rival, football linebackers. I mean, these guys are strong individuals. So the time to put on that muscle is when they're still amateurs, when they just hit puberty and they're able to get in the gym and they're able to weight lift. That's when you can stack on that stuff. And then you're really limited once you get into a pro schedule. I guess the 250 guys have a little bit of extra time, but considering they only race half of Supercross, but if you're 24, 25 years old racing pro moto, like you just got to hang on.
Yeah. It's too hard. The guys are doing so much cardiovascular volume, even just on the bike. You can't, if you put on 10 pounds in the off season, even let's say just tons of protein and you're cranking heavy weight in the gym, it's just going to go, it'll be gone by the time you get to the second round of Supercross. You're doing too much cardiovascular volume. And so it'll lean your body down anyway, naturally. But I love that it's coming back, and people are, for the longest time, lifting weights had this stigma of, oh, you'll get arm pump. Don't do that.
Right.
Just cycling and ride, and a lot of guys got away with just riding. A lot of guys. And I still think it's the number one training aspect of being fit on a motorcycle is riding. If you're trying to be a swimmer, you don't go run and think that that's going to make you a better swimmer. It's a nice compliment to it, but being in the pool is the thing, right? And so it's the same in our sport. You got to do the laps. You got to do the time on the bike. The bicycle or the stuff in the gym complements that. And I'm glad to see weightlifting come back because, guys like Jeff Ward, that was a huge, and Rick Johnson, even Carmichael, when he got later into his career, it was important for them to go in and push some big weights around, build a little bit of strength to support your joints. If you hit the ground, you're a little more durable. You're able to correct the bike when it gets a little loose underneath you. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And if you're doing the right stuff, it's not going to cause arm pump. That's a huge misconception. Now you wouldn't want to grab dumbbells and just do wrist curls. It's probably not a great idea, but there's a smart way to do it. And you see Chase going up to Santa Barbara every fall, coming out of his boot camp. And I mean, they're moving big weight around.
Yeah.
So it's good for them. I'm stoked to see that make a comeback. I think it's important.
Well, and your fellow Elevate coach Rhino has been talking about this for years, and people are finally starting to listen to him. I mean, motocross, from a biomechanical standpoint, moto is a lower extremity sport, right? It's an abs down type sport, and if your technique is on point, you're right. You don't get arm pump. Sure, you can argue that some people are maybe genetically susceptible to it or something, but I mean, for the most part, if your technique is on point, you can ride for days and not get arm pump.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
You have to be relaxed, but yes. And, Rhino uses this analogy of like a tree, right? Where your legs and your lower body are the roots, and they need to be really solid and sturdy and not flex too much. And then as you get up in the branches, your upper extremities, then you want to move more. That stability down low that he's talking about, if you're having trouble reading the metaphor, it just means that's where all your stability, your power comes from. And going back to getting in the gym, doing deadlifts, just focusing on that posterior chain and just making a really strong trunk. That will benefit you all year long in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
So.
I totally agree. And I know probably, I mean, from a percentage standpoint, you have some pro riders watching this, and I hope you pay attention. But for the vet guy who's watching, you have a lot of benefit here because you don't have to worry about racing, 31, 32 times in a year. You guys are probably planning for 4 or 5, maybe 6 big races throughout the year with some smaller ones sprinkled in. So I highly encourage you guys to consider a periodization type schedule, whether working with your trainer, or you can send us a message and we can help you out. But from a day-to-day vet guy, I think organizing your workouts and your health and wellness platform around the big races can be very easily done and probably keep you pretty well organized.
That's absolutely right. And I don't know how much you want to give away or have people calling you, Arden, but find somebody, right, that can help you with it, because all of the things that apply to pro racing apply to an amateur guy just as much. It's still your trunk is your foundation, and having that strength is important to correct the bike when it's out of control, or when it does spit you off, being able to take that hit without breaking something,
That is huge. Absolutely. I mean, these big muscles and these big posterior chains that you're referring to is going to prevent injury when you do inevitably hit the ground. So it's so important. I think we have some stuff on Elevate about that too. I think I've talked about that before.
We do. Yeah.
So yeah, if you're not going to get my cell phone number or my email address, you can always join Elevate and check some of that stuff out.
There you go.
What else you want to add on these periodization schedules? Well, before that, I had a question. You talked about swimming a second ago, and I don't know if you know this, but swimming is the most efficient form of cardiovascular exercise you can do. So a 10-minute swim at intensity is equal to about an hour on the bike, bicycle.
Yeah.
So do you know any guys who swam as a counterpart to their moto schedule?
Yeah, a lot of guys. I know Will Hahn has his guys there's a lot of trainers that use it. You're obviously limited by, you need a place to go, weather, if it's cold, and like I have an outdoor pool here at our community center that I use, but it's freezing cold in the winter, so I don't swim in the winter. But you're right. If you get in a pool and just think, okay, I'm going to swim for 10 minutes, it feels like an hour. It is so difficult. And it's great because you'll start to see gains right away. You go 3-4 times, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, it's coming easier to me. So it comes quickly, but that first time you'll think you're gonna drown. I mean, it's very difficult.
Yeah, it is. I tell my patients and my athletes both that if you can find a place to swim in, that you're doing yourself a huge service by doing that. Not only is it just more efficient, and as a father of 3, I need the most efficient form of exercise I can possibly get.
Yeah.
So
zero impact too.
Yeah.
The joints, which is fantastic.
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, find a pool, folks. But after that, is there anything that you'd want to add about the periodization schedule, or anything I need to add about it?
No, I don't. As far as periodization goes, no, I think that's really it. You've got to find somebody to help you put together how that looks. But there's a lot to it. If you're just a guy who's going, okay, I'm going to Loretta's, that's the only thing I care about. You don't want to start training right now, right? Ramp it up real hard. You'll be cooked by the time you get to, summer. So talk to somebody, maybe right now you're building strength. Maybe you're in the gym doing a lot of weight, and some longer, slower cardio just to kind of keep that cardiovascular system going. But there's a time to start and a sequence of things to kind of build for that. And it's important. So have someone help you with it. Or like I said, we talk about it a good bit in Elevate if you guys are interested in that.
Thanks, Ping. Let's do a few more of these and we can inform these people some more health and wellness tips.
I love it. Let's go.
All right, guys. Thanks for this one, and we'll see you soon.